Hello and welcome to AI plus visuals. I'm going to share my screen right now because I love to start every meeting with some appreciative imagery. It's just a great way to get people started. And I like to look at, I have many versions of these so I can make them all available to you. And of course, you can create your own. What does it look like when you're at your best? And as you look through these images, choose one that best represents you and share the number and why in the chat or feel free to just say it out loud. All right. So look through those images, maybe choose a number. Feel free to put it in the chat, or if it's easier to just unmute, feel free to just unmute and share.
For me, it would be 8.
Uh-huh.
And that is because there's a sense of openness and a sense of expansiveness and deep connection with nature.
Wonderful. I love that. I'm happy to go too. I love a good hammock time, and I take hammock time when I know I've been working really hard. So I like to balance that fanatical focus with radical self-care. Who else would like to share? Where are you when you're at your best?
I think I'm struggling because none of them fit me.
Okay.
I'm at my best when I'm focused and laser-like and totally in that moment. And I'm not seeing anything that looks like that to me.
Okay, that is really great that you can even paint a picture with your words by sharing as well. Thank you, Christy. I appreciate that. I'll take a note of that. We need something where people are focused. Good. Excellent. Well, I have several of these that I can share with you throughout this course and just want to welcome everyone to Appreciative Inquiry. This is sort of the define, discover stage. Now, you may have done a lot of definition, watching some of the intro videos, maybe preparing, maybe you attended the sneak peek or watched the video from that. And today we're really going to be talking about the discovery phase. And I also like to remind folks of where they are and honoring this earth, this land that we live on. I happen to live, work, and enjoy my life here on the ancestral lands of the Ute, Pueblo, and Anasazi elders, past, present, and future, because we have living tribes here where I live. And if you're interested in learning about where you live, you can go to native-land.ca. And I also love to know, where are you dialing in from? And so one of the things that I like to do is offer people the annotation tool. If they would like to use their stamp tool, you may have an annotation tool right in your toolbar or next to where it shows that you're seeing my screen under view options. And you're welcome to use the stamps tool. It looks like a little check mark when you open up the animation bar. You can use that check mark or heart or star. And if you're having trouble with that, or if you happen to be on a mobile device, you can also just type it in the chat or just unmute and let me know, and I can pop it in there as well. And again, just another visual way of letting us all know where we're dialing in from, and also the time constraints. We have a few other people from Europe that aren't going to be dialing in today, but I know that we've got someone, I believe, trying to think, I think we have someone in the UK, and I'm going to guess France, and I know I'm going to botch this right there. I don't know if that's right, but the reason why I like to do this is because I think it's important for us to be able to recognize that, we may all have our feet on the ground, and as our feet point to the center of the earth, that all goes to one place. We can be connected, but our heads are all going out in different directions, and we may bring in our ideas, our dreams, and everything else that makes us each unique. So just like to remind everyone that this is sort of a portal into where we are, just to be able to have this visual as well. So I'm going to just clear that. It's not letting me until I close that. Okay. So I like to also know who is in the room, who's a facilitator, who's a trainer. Maybe you're a visual facilitator or you're a scribe and recorder. And again, you can annotate those. Let me know where you are. And if you're none of those or all of those, you can stamp under each one if you're all of those, or stamp in the middle, or just let me know if you're not. And that just helps me know what is our balance in the room. So for those of you who are facilitators, if you don't identify as a visual facilitator, do you already know appreciative inquiry? A little bit, okay? And if not, that's okay. We're going to do a little bit of a review today, but you can always learn more at the Center of Appreciative Inquiry. They have a self-study intro class, and they have a virtual appreciative inquiry facilitator training, and they also offer appreciative resilience facilitator training. So all great stuff. Oh, good. So it looks like we've got a great balance between visual, facilitator, scribe and recorder. The trainers and scribe and recorders, I see them as really pushing out information. So you might prep a lot of visuals beforehand, whereas a facilitator or visual facilitator might be working in lifetime where you're really you're creating visuals as the conversation is going. So that's really the difference there. Excellent. So what's today's purpose? Well, the purpose of this 4-session course this whole week is to learn practical applications of integrating appreciative inquiry and visuals into meeting design. This is my approach to working, and I haven't seen a lot of people using it, so that's why I offered it up to the Center for Appreciative Inquiry. I love appreciative inquiry because it's benefited my life so much, and I've seen it work so well in a variety of different industries and with different organizations. And visuals, it's my language. And so it's the way that I like to be able to meet. And so in today's session, we're going to get some simple icons down on paper and begin to see how appreciative inquiry and visuals can work together. Now, I do want to say that we're going to probably talk a little bit more about appreciative inquiry than visuals, but you're going to see a lot of visuals that support that. So we started out with a little bit of appreciative imagery. Then we'll do some intros, some elevator pitches. So if you have your handout handy, whether you printed it out or if you just have it on your screen, that's fine. It should be a fillable PDF so we can share who we are. And why is that important? Because I have found as a practitioner, both mainly a facilitator, am I the right facilitator for the job? And so I like to be able to know what my skill sets are and what my clients' needs are in order to make that make sure that that's a good fit. I'm also going to be talking about appreciative agreements. We'll make some of those for ourselves, and how to create appreciative inquiry questions. Then we'll have a draw along. And I think I whizzed through this in the sneak peek, but we'll get a little bit deeper into some really simple icons. We don't have to share them with each other. So just have a pencil or your favorite drawing tool handy, and we'll just draw some things just to warm up. And then we'll have a wrap up and next steps. And hopefully what you get out of this, and maybe you're seeing a pattern here, I like to be able to do purpose, process, and payoff in each one of my sessions, is hopefully today you leave inspired to include visual tools and appreciative inquiry in your work. And I like to start out meetings, sessions with some type of a meeting principle. Have any of you ever used meeting principles before? The beginning of sessions, maybe you call them something else. It's really about setting the tone with a group and maybe giving them a little bit of direction. How many people come into a room and they have their own agenda, even though we've set out an agenda or maybe even the purpose? And so this helps people understand, hey, here's what you're going to experience. And I like to make the meeting principle align with the purpose. So really the purpose of this 4 sessions is for you to learn about these 2 things. And one of my favorite meeting principles is the balcony and the dance floor. So I'm going to put it into context for you as learners, and then I'm going to talk about how I'd use it as a principle in a meeting. As you as a learner, you're going to have some opportunities where you are experiencing by learning what it is I'm delivering to you. In other instances, you're also going to be thinking about, oh, what she just said, I could use in my meeting. So when you're having that experience, when I'm asking you, okay, experience this template now as you would as someone that's in a meeting, you're on the dance floor. So you're experiencing, you're kind of in the soup. But when you think about, oh, I think she just offered something like a meeting principle, I can use that in my next meeting. You're on the balcony level. You're saying as a learner, wait a minute, how can I put this into practice? How might this look if I delivered this to my client? And so throughout the next 4 days, you're going to have dance floor experiences and balcony experiences. And those balcony experiences are about going to another level and seeing it from a different point of view. Sometimes, and especially as facilitators, actually, we're at that balcony level watching everybody on the dance floor and helping them get through their process. But sometimes we have to put the caps on our markers, sit down with them, and have a heart to heart and be with our clients. And so that's what this principle is about. Now, if I were to introduce this into a meeting and say our meeting is going to be about change management across a large organization with a bunch of leaders, we're going to start by saying, you know, what's happening in your organization now, and they're going to be on that dance floor. And then we say, okay, as leaders, how do we take a balcony view and say, what is it that the organization truly needs? And so we're going to be talking at those different levels, and we kind of need to understand what those different places, what we would need. And so if we put ourselves on the dance floor, what is that like? And then if we put ourselves on the balcony, what's that like? And this is from Ron Heifetz, the co-author of the book, The Practice of Adaptive Leadership. So have any of you heard of this, or have any questions about this? Have lots of different meeting principles, how to listen, how to best listen, things like that. What are different elevations of communication? And again, all with visuals. Great. So hopefully you have the handouts. Does anybody not have the handouts? I think I shared them in the last email I sent. Those emails are going to come from Tech Host Academy. That just happens to be one of the businesses that I run, and it's a class that helps people have meetings and have better meetings online. And so with these handouts, and again, you can have them printed out or on hand. They're the first two pages are really pre-work for this session, but if you didn't have time to fill them out, that's okay. We're going to take a few minutes now and go over who you are, your elevator pitch, who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and how it benefits them. I'm going to pop on a 2-minute timer real quick, and I'd love for you to just fill that out for yourself if you haven't already. 2 minutes of answering the questions: who you are, what do, who do you do it for, and how does it benefit them? Here we go. Excellent. Who would be willing to share?
I can go.
Yeah.
Oh, we're just reading our
Yeah.
elevator pitch.
Yeah.
My name is Shauna, and I use she and they pronouns. I am a coach, consultant, and co-founder of Coastline. I work with people and organizations who are in a journey of growth, interested in living in alignment with their values and equity. And when we work together, people and organizations experience personal and organizational transformation that leads to social change.
Excellent. Thank you. I feel like I know so much more about you than just the picture in this Zoom call. So thank you for sharing that. Great. Who would like to go next?
I can go next.
Thanks, Heidi.
So my name is Heidi. I work as a project manager, bringing visual thinking to social work. And I work for the city of Stockholm. In a unit, we help people with severe mental health illnesses to find work. So I think of our clients as like my most important client, but I work a lot with our job coaches. And visuals make it easier for them to understand what our service implies, which leads to empowerment and more user involvement and them feeling safe. And also it leads to a lot of joy that they get really happy when we use visuals. They like it very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. I feel joyful just that in the way you ended that. That was great. Excellent. And Christy, would you like to share?
Sure. Okay, I am a recently retired school district administrator. I train, consult, and facilitate working in school districts and institutes of higher learning to develop their leadership skills and their leadership teams and just to help them meet their goals.
Wow. See, what I love about this is I can relate to each one of you in different ways. And what you just shared, Christy, all of us went to school, right? So we can all relate to where you are in your who you serve, but also where you are in your life. And you talk about retired. It's like, ooh, there's a lot of wisdom there. I feel like I could tap into you as a resource for something. That's excellent. And these elevator pitches can change depending on who you're talking to and who your audience is. Some of you may be deep experts in something, and your elevator pitch may never change. For me, because I am a visual practitioner, I'm an artist, I'm a lettering artist, I have all these different things that I do. I may have a different elevator pitch for a different reason. So mainly my main one is that I'm a visual. Hi, my name is Heather Leavitt Martinez. I like to say my full name because it says something about me. I'm a visual practitioner, which means I use visuals to support my clients in meetings to help engage participants so that the meetings could be more efficient and equitable. And I try to keep it short and succinct so that they then may have a question. The important part about having this pitch is that we can define ourselves. We clearly know who we are. So when our clients tell us who they are, we know if it's a good match. And I like to add these differentiators at the bottom so that we can really talk about the value that we bring. And I believe that if we share what it is we love to do, if we can identify what makes us different than maybe our competition or other facilitators, then, and we can show that value and we're excited about it, then our clients can get excited about it too. And I have to say that in most of my discovery meetings, I end up saying no to a client opportunity because I know I'm not the right fit or it doesn't really align with my passion. And I've learned after years that I would rather work with a client and wait for the right client to come along than work on a job that may not really fulfill me. I don't know if any of you feel that way, or if you, sometimes we don't have the opportunity to do that. We have to work with what's given to us as well. So, but I love being able to have that. And then on the second page, I talk about defining our client and really understanding what their needs are. I don't know about you, but I have been in some discovery meetings where my client tells me what they want. And I think to myself, but is that truly what they need? And so through a series of questions, we may find out, yeah, they're right. That's exactly what they want and need. And sometimes I may bring in some other experience or just some other questions that reveal something else. So asking generative questions is important. So taking the time to really think about what you hope and envision about this course as well is going to help me really customize it. Now, if I haven't done so already, I'm going to give you access to the online version that gives you recordings that I've done in the past of classes like this and all of the resources. And so what you might find is that how you use this information may change in the future. So you can always go back to that. So for the next session, we're going to do Dream, which I don't have a handout for that because I'm just going to give you a bunch of content next time. You're going to start to live into that appreciative experience. And then we have Design. And that I'd love for you to take some time over the next day or two to draft out what your client may need, because we're going to use that in the design session, in Wednesday session, to really customize some visuals and make some checklists and figure out what it is you need. Now, some other ways that we can also introduce ourselves is visually. So we had our elevator pitch, and this is a visual that I created in a session with a new team that I was on, and we had to all introduce ourselves, and they wanted us to answer 5 questions. And I thought, well, I probably could have done this for everyone else, but as everybody else was talking and I was sitting there listening, I was also adding a little bit more to this visual that I prepared before the session. They wanted to know about what our strengths were and what were some of the things, what were our triggers, and what do sometimes people get wrong about me in my first impression, and then what am I working on, and what do I want, what do I invite others to help me with? And so a lot of times in the visual world, and you'll see this a lot in sketchnoting, people will do visual self-portraits where they draw a picture of themselves. I just took a picture of myself and then traced it onto my iPad. You can do it with markers or digitally, but I drew a picture of myself and then I answered those questions specifically for that group. But you can talk about the kind of work you do. You can do your elevator pitch around a picture. And that could just be something that is a page on maybe a PDF that you send out to clients. It could be on your website. This is pretty detailed. There's lots of little bitty information in there, but we were having a conversation about me and I wanted to make sure that people really understood who I was. Another thing you can do, because this is pretty personal and it's, I wrote it pretty quickly, is you can create an infographic if you're interested in it. And this is an infographic that I created in, oh my gosh, 2011 when I just first started as a visual practitioner. I had been a graphic designer for about 15 years, so I knew how to make visuals, but I wasn't using them in meetings. It was more transactional. So it actually took me about 3 months to gather all of this information to create this visual. But what this visual is essentially kind of a sales tool to say, these are my offerings. So across the top, you'll see the columns: graphic facilitation, graphic recording, custom templates, custom graphics, and chart work. I saw those as 2 different things at that time: Prezi presentations and scribe videos. And you'll notice on the left, this is where we're working with a lot of people, having really in-depth conversations and pulling information from people. And then on the right, it's more about pushing. Here's some information that we need to get out. So you'll notice that the bodies, the people on the left, they're bigger, meaning we're having more in-depth, maybe more of an impact for less people. And on the right, the bodies are smaller because we might be reaching a lot more people, but we don't have a real measurable way to know what the impact there is. And so this was a visual that's also clickable, that if people wanted to see examples of my work, and I could share this PDF sometime, but it's a PDF that if I were to click graphic facilitation, it would take you to a case study that, again, I break down from purpose, process, and payoff, and it shows an example of graphic facilitation. And this particular tool helped me win enough work in my first couple of years of being a visual practitioner that I started a team of visual practitioners. So it was a visual that really, I mean, even today I still use it. I haven't even changed it or updated it in that long, and it's still winning me work. And so having a visual to say, these are my offerings, or here's what I can do, and here's the impact for you, really tells a message. And so this was the cover page of a portfolio I would send out to share with my clients to say, this is the type of work I can do. So does that bring up any questions or give you any ideas?
I really love this, and I'm like, I think about like how something like this is like used on a website. And also like, you know, how I love the idea of it being interactive, and like the amount of work that you had to do to like to like actually get it to a place where it was like so I'm just really grateful, and like it helps me think about like how to use something like that in a way that feels aligned with what I do.
Yeah. And you can just do the top part, right? These are my offerings. Here's what it entails. But if you notice at the bottom where there's those little people in those pie charts, those little pie charts are what it takes to pull it off. And so when people say, oh, you make those scribe videos where someone's writing and someone's talking, that's so cool. I can get one done for $197 from this company. And I go, that's great. But if what that takes is a whole team full of people, it takes a script writer, a voiceover, a artist, it takes video, it takes a lot. And so when people ask me about that and I give them a price of like, okay, I start at $10,000 when I make a scribe video, and they go, that's really expensive. I'm like, I'm one person and it's going to take all of those things. The people that are doing the $197 videos, they've got a whole team full of people and they're cranking them out, and they don't always look that great, you know? So I'm trying to educate my clients of what it's going to take. And a lot of times I like to co-facilitate. I'd prefer there to be a lead facilitator and I'm doing the visuals. So that's why in graphic facilitation, I say there's two people. Smaller groups, I can do it all, but I really like to collaborate. And so this becomes what I like to call a visual, like I forgot the word that I usually use, but what it is it's a focal point for us to have a conversation. So it's just a visual to have a conversation around. So yeah, good. All right, so let's talk a little bit more. Let's now you've kind of had a little bit of dance floor, a little bit of balcony. Let's jump back on the dance floor and let's talk about some appreciative agreements. So in some cases we sometimes say ground rules, which that sounds a bit negative, but appreciative agreement is what can we all agree on in order to get the most out of our week together. So for the next 4 sessions, what are some of the things that you might see on a ground rules flip chart if a facilitator was asking everyone to type something in? You're welcome to put that in the chat or annotate right on the screen. What are some appreciative agreements that we can all agree on? Make some for yourself, and we'll go through these, and I'll show you how we do this as a group. So what are some of the things that we will either need or agree to do to make our next 4 days together great?
Do you want us to just say them out loud, or are you asking us
I'd
to?
love for you to either annotate them or put them in the chat so that I can copy and paste them, because we're going to move them around and I'm going to show you how I do this. Yeah, so we want them typed up in some way. And if you can't type, feel free to unmute. That's something that when we're designing, I call it designing for the margins, making sure that everyone is able to communicate and participate. That's why I say if you can annotate, great. If that's a little too tech heavy, like I can't get the annotation tool to work just right, the chat's easy. And if some folks are having trouble just typing or can't type, I'll say, go ahead and unmute and I'll type it for you. But I like to give people a little bit of time and space to type first so that their thoughts aren't influenced by other people in the room. Great. So what I like to do is then say, okay, when we look at these agreements, and feel free to keep typing. How can these agreements, how can we kind of rate or cluster these agreements so that they're more appreciative? So on the left side here, where these people are kind of gray, you all did really, really great, by the way. That would be, oops, that would be more like when people say things like, turn off notifications, right? So turn off notifications is just sort of like a rule. That's a ground rule. That's like, okay, we're all going to agree to do that. I would literally put that over here in the turn off notifications in the gray area. But what if we wanted to reframe turn off notifications into something that's a little bit more positive or something that's really life-giving? What might we say there? And actually, we have the answer right here. Stay present, be curious, right? If you're present and curious, notifications, it doesn't even matter if they're on, right? I love celebration. When we can celebrate, it really brings a lot of life and energy. Create a safe space. Some people may want to argue, what does safe space mean? So some people use the word brave space, a place where we can be brave and encourage one another. But I think safe is good. Does anybody have any other, like what's come up around safe? How have you kind of navigated that language if it comes up? Yeah.
For me, I like to use safer space. And I would say that like we want to co-create a safer space. I mean, there's like the facilitator or the main holder of the space has, of course, a responsibility to make sure that that happens. But like,
right.
there's only so much we can do. Like we have to do that together, right? And
Right.
like you said, like we can't guarantee safety because everybody's level of safety are different, right? So we can commit to co-create a safest space as we possibly can, knowing that different people are going to need different things to be in a safer space. And again, that it might not work, but we're at least committing.
And no shame on this. I'm really glad someone typed it, but can you feel the energetic difference between create a safe space and commit to co-creating a safer space? Feels like an ongoing action. Great. Whoever wrote fail forward, say more about that. What does fail forward mean to you?
So I wrote that, and I think that's kind of connected to open to experimentation. It's like this openness and even celebration that, I mean, for me, for example, visuals is new. Like I'm going to mess it up, and like I want to be like totally okay with that, and really like savor that like that is just going to be part of the process, and that it's going to teach me some things. And so like I want to uplift it, and I don't necessarily love the language, so I would love to to experiment with that. But that's just that feeling of like we're gonna move and it's gonna be ugly perhaps, and like it's not gonna feel good, and that's okay because it's all part of the larger picture of like learning and growing.
I love that. When I first saw fail forward, I was like, oh, that's a little bit negative, a little bit more negative than open to experimentation. But then after you explained it, it was like, oh, there's so much life there. And the word that I got hung up on, and you finally said it, was it's okay. It's going to be okay. Like we can do this and it's okay. So I think these are both excellent. And when we can explain them to each other and understand them better, they have more energy around them, right? So one of the things that I wrote was take space, make space. And this is less of a how we're going to, well, it is about agreeing to how we're going to work together, but it's also giving people permission to invite others and to also step back when they've taken too much space, and almost a self facilitation technique. So what do I mean by that? Sometimes, and we've all experienced as facilitators, we have someone who's really, 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 really talkative. And how do we get them to stop? And as a facilitator or as another participant, we are agreeing to say, can we make space for others so we can hear more voices in the room. So if you hear someone who's talking a lot, you may use that kind of invitational language. Or if you are self-aware and you know you take up a lot of space, this is saying, why don't we make space for others? So it's an agreement that we can take space, make space. I'm sure there's other ways of saying that as well. We can make it more positive. But I love the idea of appreciative agreements because, one, it's appreciative. It's not a ground rule. Like sometimes when we set the tone in the beginning and we're like, saying turn off your phones, it's like all of a sudden we're in trouble and we haven't even done anything yet. Like we haven't even worked together as a group. So appreciative agreements, when we come together and say, here's what we need in order to be successful, then we've come together, we've agreed upon them. And if we can all say, do we all agree with these? Does anyone have a problem with any of these? Or if so, speak now. Yeah, can we get a thumbs up? Is everybody good with these agreements? We might do a thumbs up. Then we say, these are our agreements. And, we can post them. I'm going to take a picture of this and we're going to review it later on so that we have it. And if these were all on a flip chart, then this would be the type of thing that we would have up in the room or would be somewhere in our notes if we're doing all of this digitally. So excellent. Any questions about this now we're going back up onto the balcony. Any questions about delivering something like this or anything else you'd add? It's pretty straightforward, right? Excellent. Okay, so let's clear this. And that's all I think that's all the annotation that we're going to do for the rest of this time. So you can turn off your annotation tool. No more need for that. Just want to also make some agreements in terms of learning. And I'm going to push this towards you, but if you have anything else you want to add, feel free to put it in the chat. We're all learners here. So give yourself grace. Some of you may have a lot of experience being facilitators. Some of you might have a lot of experience drawing. Just give yourself grace and ask questions. So your questions really are going to help everyone. One of the laws of group dynamics is that if you have a question, chances are other people have a question and can benefit from hearing the answer, even if it's just a reminder. So let's jump into appreciative inquiry. What is appreciative inquiry? I also call it AI. So if you hear me talking about AI, it's appreciative inquiry, not artificial intelligence. It's a strength-based positive approach to leadership development, personal and organizational change. And why do we use appreciative inquiry? Because it inquires into the positive, what gives life, what helps us thrive. And we can physically and emotionally feel it when someone is facilitating in an appreciative way as opposed to someone just running a meeting. And so hopefully you're going to get a little bit of both of those. And so some people might ask about, well, what about the questions? And so what we want to be able to do when we're starting to write appreciative inquiry questions to help us as facilitators, there's 3 different kinds of questions that I'm going to share with you. Clarifying questions. These are great both in the facilitation meeting, but also especially wonderful at the beginning when we have a discovery meeting with clients. Process questions that helps people get through the process, and then solution-oriented questions. And all of these can be used at whether you're in a discovery meeting or you're meeting with a client. So if you notice on the left, you're going to see in a little bit smaller print, these are just open-ended questions. Can you say more about that? Could you tell me more? What does fill in the blank mean to you? What do you think that is? How so? Now, these aren't apples to apples. I just wanted to show you those are just open-ended questions. They're not yes/no questions. They're gonna be a little bit more generative and help people answer in longer sentences. But if you go to the right, now we're getting into some appreciative inquiry questions. What are your or our strengths as a team? What made a certain project or some event successful? You're looking for those success factors. What would be the best outcome for fill in the blank? It might be, what would be the best outcome of this upcoming meeting? What would be the best thing that could happen if we did this? And then what are the benefits? So the difference between these 2 columns, the one on the left is generative. It's okay. But the ones on the right are what we call universally positive questions. And universally positive questions will invoke universally positive answers, which means if someone said, can you say more about that? And they're like, oh, Susie was the worst, right? It's like, hold on. But if you say, what are your strengths? And we've talked about them today, some of the things that you do differently, what you're good at, then people are going to talk about that. That's going to generate a feeling of confidence for them. And it's going to help you understand what their strengths are. And if the whole team understands what the strengths are of the individual on a team are, then they can build from that. It's a foundation of strengths. So these are really more clarifying. Any questions about this or any that you would like to add?
I think like I like to change like the second one, like what made something successful. I feel like sometimes that could be a lot of pressure because it could be something that worked or you learned something, but like, you know, it wasn't successful according to like society.
Right.
So I like to ask like what made that work.
Yes. That's great.
I also like to ask questions around like, how do you know or how do you feel about it? Because if people know why something works for them or why they're connected to it or in line with it, then they're more likely to know how to replicate it.
Right, exactly. And so where that comes from, that particular question was, I was in a meeting with a bunch of leaders across this organization, and they got into a fight. Like they were literally yelling at each other. And I was like, whoa. So I stopped the group and I said, we're going to do an exercise called Speak Through Me. Has anybody tried this before? You have to be really well resourced to do this. And that means you're saying, okay, rather than you yelling at this person, I want you to talk to me and tell me why this is a problem or why this didn't work. So it's not appreciative at this point. At this point, it's let's get this all out. Let's sit with, and we're building resilience with one another to do this, but let's get this out. As soon as they started talking to me, their anger lowered. It was like, okay, well, I can't yell at her. She didn't have anything to do with it. She's sort of the third, the neutral third party person. So they started speaking to me. And when they did, they calmed down. And when the person over here that they were really directing it to was seeing how upset they were, then they started to gain empathy for them. And so that practice of doing it, it went on a little bit longer than I felt comfortable. I was like, okay, like I felt really full of a lot of negative stuff that was coming at me, but I was resourcing it, meaning like, think about it being like energetic judo. Like I was like not taking on what people were saying to me. It wasn't my thing. And then I said, what have we noticed in this organization? I gave a specific example of what someone said that, and in your words, did work. How was this successful? So then I started writing down, because they could see it, what they were saying about the good things that were happening, the things that did work. Okay, that didn't work. We heard you. It didn't work. Here's what did work. And so it was a great way and opportunity to reframe things. So if you find yourself asking a question and there's some negative things that come out, we don't have to put a beautiful, polish on everything. Not everything has to be positive. Sometimes we need to sit with that and understand it a little bit better. But then how can we move that towards a place of where they want to go? This is essentially all in that hope, is that we're trying to help them through a process, which my next questions are about process. So questions like, what's coming up for you now? Well, you could get all kinds of things. That could lead the conversation into a whole different rabbit hole. What's your reaction? How would you describe what's going on? How might you reframe that? That's starting to move it a little bit. How does this affect you? Those are all, again, open-ended questions, but how we can flip that into, how does this inspire you? What sparks your passion for this? How can you, they, or whatever, be more inclusive? How can we include more people in this conversation? What could you or they do to make a more meaningful impact? So you're in it. How do you help it along so that we don't keep looking at problems? Now, if we need to look at a problem to understand it better, understood. But if we keep focusing on problem, that's all we have. At some point, we have to move to the end of the meeting where we are actually making some kind of progress, right? Because you're gonna have people in the room that are ready to roll up their sleeves. So here are some process questions. What are some other ways to ask process questions that could be unconditionally or universally positive questions? And this takes some wordsmithing. This takes time. And you said it earlier, Shohana, when you said what worked. Didn't have to be successful. That gets into okay, what's the success criteria, which a group might be ready for, but just saying what's working. Let's do more of that. We're in the middle of the process. What's working? Let's do more of that. And how can we do even better? Because the people that don't like change are going to say, let's just do what works. And then the people who do want to make things better and like change are going to say, can we do this too? Sure. As long as we can keep doing what works. Let's not throw away that for something that might be unknown if we want to keep going in this direction. So we've got, again, those open-ended questions compared to unconditionally positive questions. And then solution-oriented questions. So sometimes we don't want to get to solution too quickly because we might need to have more discussion around something. However, there's some cultures where they know everything, they're all on the same page. Let's just get right to solution. So the difference between those open-ended questions, have you identified the problem? Now you're focusing on a problem. But what if you could say, what's that desired outcome, right? Those are completely different questions. Again, solutions in the positive side, what has worked? What do you believe contributed to that? And here's where you might say success, because when they say what's worked, that's a success criteria. Whether they want the pressure of that word or not, this is what made that successful. And what opportunities do you see will enhance this? How could we do other things to make it even better for those who like change and who want more? So really it's about shifting the way we think as facilitators to help ask those questions. That might feel a little leading. If it feels too leading to you, that's a really great sense of knowing that you have to say that question might be too soon, right? When is the right time to ask an unconditionally positive question? I love to start out meetings that way because it sets the tone. But as we said before, we might, and every meeting goes through a groan zone. We're going to go through that at some point where things could get challenging, difficult, or just not perfect. That's fine. But when we ask these questions, I trust you as facilitators to know when that's a good time. Great. Any questions about questions?
In this case, like I would ask sometimes a question around like, if you could dream, blah 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 blah.
Right.
Would that be an appreciative question, or would that just be an open-ended question?
So I love that. And it could, and you could word it a lot of ways. And we talk about that. We're going to talk about that a lot tomorrow about the dream question. And I actually have tools to make the dream more concrete. And so that's great because some people love to dream and other people are like, oh, here we go with the idea brainstorming again. So that's why I'm going to give you some tools to help you do that. Dreaming is absolutely an appreciative question. And you can word that different ways. If you had a magic wand, what would you love the outcome to be? If you could have anything in the world without any constraints of time, money, energy, whatever, what is that? Absolutely. Those are appreciative inquiry questions because we're inquiring into the possibility. We're inquiring into the positive. Yeah, absolutely. People usually don't dream about things they don't want, right? So we're talking about how do we get to where we want to go. And there's a lot of really great resources. So these are two of my favorite books, Encyclopedia of Positive Questions and the Appreciative Team Building Question. The Appreciative Team Building book is really about how do we make this more inclusive? How do we work together? How have we done that? And going back to the question I asked earlier about what have we done that was successful, there's a lot of questions that begin with share a time when. And then going back and looking at when there was something that worked, a project, a time, whatever, and really identifying those attributes because sometimes things aren't repeatable. And we need to recognize that. And sometimes they are. And when we say, hey, look, we still have the same people, the same skills, we're a lot smarter, we're working better together, we start building on those things. And then once we can have that appreciative team building, then we can go further faster, right? We can do more. And the Encyclopedia of Positive Questions is again just a really great way to form those questions. If you're wondering, how do I get them to really look at the possibilities here? And both of these books can be treated sort of like a cookbook. You can literally flip through, point a finger, look at a question and go, ooh, that's good. That's a great prompt for me to start thinking about how I can ask, or just use the index or the table of contents. You don't have to read it from cover to cover. It's just a really great reference book. And you may have others as well that you use. And I'd say feel free to put those in the chat, or when I give you access to the online course, add them there too, because there's books are always being written about appreciative inquiry, and these are great resources. But be starting to listen. And hopefully, if you don't already, you're going to start listening to the way people talk and how their words can really change the way other people feel. Good. Well, I do want to do this quick review and then take a few minute break to the top of the hour. You may have seen either from me or other places these two visuals. The one on the left is the 4D appreciative inquiry model. This was the very first visual that I made when I started practicing appreciative inquiry. And then after my training, after my formal training of becoming a certified facilitator, the 5D is what they were teaching. And that is that we start with the defining what is this meeting, this session, this project going to be about. The discover part, this is where we find the strengths, who's a part of this. And today, when we get back, we're going to, after we have a little bit more discussion, we're going to do a draw along for that area. The dream, we talked a little bit about the dream. We'll do that tomorrow. How do we take all of the information in those first three phases to design and experience an appreciative inquiry meeting, session, experience for folks? And then how does that get delivered? So the delivery, as you're going through these next couple of days, you might be asking me questions like, how did you do that? You're on that balcony view going, what marker are you using? What camera are you using? You might be asking me technology questions. That's fine. I'll answer them. But that deliver session, we're going to talk a lot more about what goes into delivering. And if you are great at both in person and digital, super, you'll probably have lots to also contribute. And if you are good at one and not the other, I'm going to be covering both. So any questions so far before we take a break? And I'll put that 5D PDF, that 5D visual in the chat if you need it. All right, welcome back. So one of the things that I like to remind folks is that we all have a desired outcome. You all came into this session hoping to get something out of it, I hope. And I know that you all, just from hearing your intros, you have some experience facilitating, consulting, you have some of that. So I want you to be thinking about the desired outcome that you have in mind for this class. So just like a pole vaulter, we've got a high bar, but we've also need to have a little bit of a low bar. So what I'd love to know from you, and again, you can either put this on the screen or you can type it in the chat, is what is the best possible outcome for you in this course? That's your high bar. And then what's your low bar? What do you need in order to feel satisfied, just status quo, with the time and resources that you've invested in this 4-day class? You might want to start with the low bar and then go to the high bar, because sometimes what people say is it's all high bar. It's like, no, let's talk about what's your, like, this will make me satisfied. This was time well spent is the low bar. And then what would exceed your expectations in the high bar? Okay, so I'm going to share with you. So I love this. We'll go over low bar first, and let's go through these. Take away a few tools to use to make meetings visual. Excellent. Hopefully between the handouts and some of the things that I've already given you, that hopefully that's given you a few ideas. And through the next 3 sessions, I'm going to give you a lot more. And I have an entire like vault full of things. So if at any time you're thinking, I think there's a visual out there for this, feel free to contact me anytime. So learning something new I didn't know before, this makes me think of the 4 steps of learning. The unconscious competent, conscious uncompetent. Do you all know that, the 4 steps of learning? If not, okay, I'll draw it out here in a minute. So yeah, I don't know what you don't know. And so you'll have to tell me when you learn something new that you didn't know. That's great. I'd love to hear what surprised you or what you learned. And then ideas for a plan for working with new groups. Now, I love this particular one. Whoever wrote that, thank you. And that's kind of how I set up the handouts, was that kind of setting you up for this is the way that I work and operate in terms of design. I'm creating that draft, but I truly do start with an elevator pitch. What is it that I would say to this particular client to let them know how I can serve them? Right. And so this whole thing is how I work. So hopefully that, and of course you can totally customize it for your needs, but hopefully that can give you some ideas about working with new groups. And then, yeah, so a plan, ideas for a plan, and then a plan. Good. So whoever wrote that, this would be a wonderful thing for us to focus on in the office hours if it doesn't get covered in the next 3 sessions. So I love this. Get a mini refresher course for my AI facilitator training and be inspired to re-engage in AI with visuals. Excellent. I hope that the visuals become a great vehicle for you to be able to do that. And if you've done any kind of AI reading up, or if you're getting your facilitator training, excellent. This is a great way to help that along. And it can be part of your practicum. And I'm also happy to share with all of you my practicum, my case study for when I got my AI facilitator training. I kind of went guerrilla style, and it ended up being 14 pages of just visuals and how I used those. So I'll share those with you as well. And then learn how to play and be more organic with my work and how I present and connect it to others. And that's what I love about having visuals, is that it can be a focal point for people to be looking at and reflecting on, rather than worrying about what am I wearing or how am I standing, or it's sort of a look at this. I like to kind of treat it that way as well. So these are all excellent. And what I love to especially to have adult learners do, and some groups do it, I have to say I have some groups that are really good at it and some who aren't. So now I'm going to kind of take it to the balcony level, is first of all, I do this with a lot of discovery meetings. I will start out, if it's a brand new client I've never worked with before, or even if it's a repeat client, low bar, high bar. What do we want to get out of today? What is it we want to get out of this next 45 minutes together? If we don't already have an agenda set up with a client, I'll ask this question, and it helps me manage their expectations. And then when it comes to learners, what I like to do is I like to ask them, what is it that you want to get out of this class? What is it that you want to learn? And you've already told me. And then what I say next is, and sometimes I have some participants do this even prior to the class, but I just want to give this to you now. And that is, ask yourself, once you've written down, what do I want to learn? What questions do you need to ask as an adult learner to meet those expectations? How many times have you signed up for a class and then went, wow, that is not what I thought it was going to be? Maybe the description was one thing and then the class was another. That happens to me a lot. And sometimes it's because the description was written and then the class was designed, or, the marketing just doesn't align with what's being delivered. And I have a really hard time with this class because it's such a specific thing that I've got to speak to a lot of different people to meet them where they are. But the reality is I have a treasure trove of how to deliver AI and visuals. So I'd love to put this back on you and say, based on what you want to learn, what questions do you need to ask in order to meet that expectation? Because I'm going to give you lots of information, lots of opportunities to experiment. And then even in the office hours, then we can really co-create and do some deep dives. So if there are any questions just right off the bat that come up that go, I got to ask this, it could be a burning question. Yeah.
Like, how do you know? Well, I guess you already did this, like you have the bar thing. So like how do you know that we are like connecting and like connecting with what your desired outcome is?
Mm. Are you asking me as the teacher and you as the students? How do I know? I know by I know by a couple of things. I know from experience that, and this is a smaller group, but I know that there are going to be some keeners, some people that are like, oh, they're right on top of it. They're going to show me. They're extroverts, and then there are those who are thinking harder. I can tell, even online, I can tell, are people multitasking? Are they engaged? That kind of thing. But I'm also going to be speaking on a lot of different levels over the next 3 days, and something's going to click with one of you, and you're going to tell me. And I've had students that don't say anything for 3 days, and they show up at the office hours, and we discover something. It's like they were really getting it the whole time. They just didn't talk. So I didn't know until that point, right? So some of you I may never know. And some of you might be showing me all the time. Like, I get that. I'm engaged, or I want to use that. And part of that is about, are you learning all of these things for the first time and it's giving you a bunch of ideas? Or are you saying, check, 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 like you're checking and you're waiting for that piece of information to come. And then when I give it, you go, I'm going to put that to use right away. And so what I'd love to know from all of you, if there's a question like you just asked, really a question, and maybe that's helpful. I'm guessing you're asking me because you're wanting to know how I operate, but you might also be asking for yourself on how you would know, right? So let me ask you this. Are you facilitating mainly online or in person?
Mostly online right now.
Mostly online. And what would you say would help you know? Like, what's one of the cues to help you know that people are connecting to the meeting and that they're engaged?
I think that it's really hard because once I struggle because like I might not need to know.
That's right.
And it's like, how do I need to detach from that, right?
Right.
So it's like kind of trusting the process, but also it's like, how do you get feedback to be like, okay, yeah, continue doing that because like it's working, right? Or like people are benefiting somehow, or like how do you not, right?
Exactly. And so I love this question because it's a question that I got asked a lot when the pandemic first started. Now, I had been teaching online and working with clients online for years before the pandemic hit. Now, if you think about the people who had never done that during the pandemic, how hard that was for them. And it might have been some of you, right? And I was listening to a video this morning and I was listening to a teacher that said when the pandemic hit, I had to teach online and it was awful. And I was thinking, really? Because when I started teaching the Tech Host Academy class and training teachers to teach online, I talked a little bit like it kind of needs to be like a cooking show, like where you have everything ready and you present it. Because if you wait for everyone, because if everyone's sitting there and they have resting thinking face, they're thinking. You can't know. You have no idea. So you have to put in ways for people to engage. And if that means annotating on a screen, asking questions, getting, pushing information, pulling information, that's really when you know. But there's an approach to teaching where you have to assume that most of them know. And when we design for the margins, we design for the keeners, the people that are already know they could probably teach this class until I hit the one thing that, oh, I didn't know that, right? And then there are those that are hearing it for the very first time, or they have to be here, which I don't think any of you have to be here. I think you're here by choice. So, when you're designing for those margins, then everybody in the middle is like a taco. They all get served, right? So they're fine. But when we design for those margins, then we kind of have to make the assumption that about 80% of the people are coming along and that it's going to work. Does that help? Does that create more questions, which is totally fine? Yeah. Some people aren't comfortable with silence, and some people are. And I practice a little bit of both because I know some people aren't comfortable, so I move along. And then sometimes I wait for a long time, and we do in the business what we call a mute and then 2 sip pause. And when you do the 2 sip pause, people are waiting for you to stop drinking, but it also gives them some time to think and maybe for someone to either type in the chat or say something. Yeah. What other questions can you ask as an adult learner? I'm putting it on you a little bit to meet your expectations. And maybe you don't have any now, but if you do, please feel free to ask. And I'll tell you why that's important is because I'd hate for you to spend 3 more days with me and not get what you need out of this, because I'm only showing you just that tip of the iceberg of how to be a visual practitioner using appreciative inquiry, right? It's something I've been doing for about, about 13 years now. And I still get situations. I had one yesterday where a client came to me and said, this is what we want to do. And I came up with a visual solution that I've never come up with before. And so that's why asking those questions is going to invoke a lot of ideas and new ways of working too. Cool. Let's do a little bit of a draw along, but before I do, I am going to talk a little bit about the 4 steps of learning, because I said that I would draw that out. And let's see, I've got a piece of paper back here. I'm going to show in just a moment, but there are 4 steps to learning. And this goes back to, I want to learn something I didn't know before, which is totally understandable. And you can draw it like this. You can draw along with me if you'd like, or just watch. And there are 4 steps. And the first step is, this is a lot of words that sound a lot alike. Unconscious. And I don't even know if I'm going to spell this right. Unconscious. Might be getting that wrong. Let me focus into. There we go. Don't let the word incompetent get in your way. Conscious. Incompetent. It's okay. It just means I don't know. And we have conscious competent, which means we do know what we're doing. And then we have unconscious incompetent. So what does that mean? When we first start out learning, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. How many of you know anything about rocket science? Maybe, but do you know everything? Probably not. We don't know what we don't know. And then there comes a point where we know what we don't know. This is where we know what questions to ask because there's something in that area we don't know yet. We know what we don't know. Then conscious competent is we know what we know. And these 2 steps is where the learning happens. Because we know what we don't know, we come to class and we ask a question. And then we go, that's a great idea. I'm going to put that into action. And then we say, oh, wait a minute, I tried it. It didn't work. I need to go back and ask another question. And then, oh, okay, that makes sense. I'll try that next time. And this is the learning cycle. This is where our learning happens. And we can spend all of our entire lives here, and then we come across a new subject. Uh-oh, we're unconscious and competent about it. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to try it out, and then I'm going to be in that learning cycle. And then eventually, everything comes into autopilot, meaning I can do this in my sleep. This is part of what I do. This is those differentiators that you're so good at, your strengths that you've been practicing for years. That is what you're unconscious and competent about. This is where you are a master. You're good. Like, I got this. You don't have questions about it. You have no doubts about your ability. So what questions do you have about that? 4 steps of learning. 4 steps of learning.
Heather, I think that last one you mean unconscious competence.
Yes, you're right.
Not incompetence. Okay.
Yep, you're right. Unconscious competent, because you don't realize that you know it. You don't even have to think about it. Thank you. Yes. So you've got 2 unconscious, 2 conscious, 2 incompetent, 2 competent. Yep. Thank you. Yep. So those are those 4 steps. And if you're new to AI or new to visuals, either one, you're in this area, and then right away, you're going to be here. And you can stay in this cycle for as long as you want until you get so good at it, that you don't even think about it anymore. Good. So now, if you're already drawing, let's take a look at this. This is essentially our agenda for this week. Oh, you're seeing my messy desk and everything. And we're also going to draw a few of the icons on here just to get you warmed up and be thinking about icons, what they mean. So if you want to grab it, you can either write directly on that PDF that I put in the chat if you didn't already have it printed out, or you can just take another piece of paper. And a lot of times all I do is just draw a cycle. And sometimes I label it. So the first part is define. And this is really where maybe, let me talk about this, like if I'm getting ready to go into a discovery meeting. So I did this just the other day. I gathered information about my client. I read the emails that she sent me. I looked at her website. I looked at her social media because I wanted to see if they were doing good marketing. But on their website, I was really looking for the values and the mission. Is this a client that aligns with my values and I want to work with? So before a session, I might be defining or learning more and gathering information. And I might be asking them, what is it that you want to get out of? What are we talking about? What's that purpose? And oftentimes I'll write that purpose in the middle here. And other information like, the who's the client, maybe the point of contact, that kind of thing, maybe even the date, that kind of thing. And then here's the discovery. Now, just because I have a discovery meeting doesn't mean that all of that information goes in this area. Sometimes I'm also asking them to dream. I might throw out some design ideas and then ultimately ask them about the delivery of this particular session. So let's focus a little bit on this discovery part. And this is where I might be asking them about their ideas, the people on their team, always their strengths and skills. I might be asking them about, where are you located? That might be important. It might be that they're a distributed team, so it's not as critical. I'm going to move my thing up here for a second. There we go. So I'll just draw a couple of icons for you so you can see how I break those down. When I'm drawing a light bulb, I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to draw one. You could simply draw a circle with a couple of lines underneath and a little filament. It's just can be a V, it could be whatever. That's really simple. So if I'm taking notes and I hear an idea that they have or an idea that I have, I'm just going to draw a light bulb so that I just have a visual next to whatever it is I'm writing. This is the simplest of sketchnoting, just throwing ideas down. Another way that I draw a light bulb is I think of an actual incandescent bulb like this, and I might add a couple of little features, and I put a little curly Q in there, and that just makes it look like an incandescent bulb, very similar to this, but maybe a little bit more detailed. If you end up drawing those new bulbs that look like this, some people might recognize what it is, but they might also think, especially if you draw it in green, they think it's a tree. And you might not be drawing this for anybody else but yourself. So maybe put a couple of little sparkle marks around it. But this is just for me to be thinking about ideas. Now, when it comes to people, I might just simply draw a head and a body. And that might be it. That's all I need because I'm just drawing people. But you might also say, well, I kind of want to draw some eyes, a nose, a mouth, some hair, an ear. Like, okay, now we're getting into it. And pretty soon it's like, what are you drawing? A picture of somebody? We really don't need to go there. That's not necessary. Sometimes just this is enough of an object. And I'll show you later in the delivery phase where I have Post-it notes that are shaped like people. So I'll just draw one side and then I'll mirror the other side, and they make actual sticky notes that look like this so that you can write people's names, maybe their role when they joined the organization, so that you've got a sticky note. Or maybe you're trying to do a persona, taking someone through a customer journey or something. So again, can go really, really simple if you're just drawing down what people are, and then write down their strengths. This is the appreciative inquiry part where this is where people are giving meaning to the work that we're doing. Now, when people start talking, we've got to be able to write what they're saying. And some people are going to be expressing ideas, and that's fine. So if they say it out loud, you want to always write the words first and then draw a box around it. And a simple formula to think about, okay, I'm going to draw a speech bubble, is decide where it's coming from. So if I have a person sitting over here, I'm going to draw a little, almost like a little comma mark. And proportionately, it's going to be about a quarter of the size. Like in proportion, this is about a 1/4 of the entire thing. Now that's getting a little mathematical, but if you're like, how big do you make that little speech comma or that tail, that's how you draw it. But you always write the words first, because if you draw the box and then they say a whole lot more, it's not going to fit in the box. If you yourself, if this is you and you're having some ideas, but you haven't said them yet, a thought bubble would start with little circles, get to bigger circles, and then you would draw a thought bubble. And one way to do it is to draw a big arch, little arch, big arch, little arch, big arch, little arch, big arch. It can be as many numbers as you want. But all I'm doing is just drawing a cloud, essentially, with a couple of little dots that say this is a thought. I'm going to go back on this piece of paper over here. And anytime we're talking about a place, I think about in Google, the little marker. And I draw the ground first, and then I just draw this sort of upside down teardrop with a dot in the middle. And that's going to be your place. So these are simple icons that you can just draw really quickly so that whatever information you're putting around them is together. This might just be happening in a discovery meeting as you're just taking your own notes, Or it might be happening in front of the group when they're telling a story and you just want a simple icon. And these are icons, but now if we start to take form and say, well, what if something happened over time? You might have a timeline. It just starts out with a line. And if the beginning is like, okay, we know exactly when that started, and I don't know why, but I always draw it at an angle. But in the future, we don't know where it's going to go. You might have dots, like an ellipsis, or you might have an arrow that shows forward or really thinking into the future. Or if you're talking about something defined, you might just put a line on the other end. And here's where, whenever we have a timeline, you can have a discussion. We call it a graphic timeline when we say, well, where were we? There's your place. And maybe where are we now? Maybe we have a new headquarters. Who is the founder? You might put a person there. Who were the early adopters? Who were maybe some people that made some significant contributions over time? And you just put a little tick mark every time there's something there. And you start to balance it out between pictures and words. Sometimes when there's a big event that happens, I might put it on a sticky note. I might write what it was and put like a sparkle mark. It's literally, I just put 3 little things, and that just gets the attention that this was something that happened. It's not an explosion. It's not a bomb, though that's what could have happened. But it's just saying, hey, this was an event. This was something that happened. And sometimes when I want to show, in the future, we're going to have to take some action, I might draw a calendar. And the way that I draw a calendar, I don't know why, you can make it straight, but I do it do like these little backwards commas because I want to make it look like one of those calendars where you rip off a page. And then I might write the date inside of here. The idea here is that whatever icon you enjoy drawing that you feel good or confident about, or you think I can do this over and over again, that becomes part of your visual library. And you may only start out with maybe 3 or 4, and then you can eventually build up to having dozens. It's like a visual language. So those are just a few icons that you can draw. Are there anything icons or visuals that you would like for me to break down for you? Is there anything that you would like me to see me draw that might be simple, a concept or a simple thing that you're like, I need something for that?
How will you draw like dreams or possibilities, or I don't know if you're going there next.
Yeah, exactly. And so with that, I literally draw a cloud. And the way that I draw a cloud, it's a really fast one because I draw them really fast, is I start out with a curve like that, because this is like movement, wind. And then I just taking the same idea up here, and sometimes I connect it, sometimes I don't. Some people like coloring books. I like implied lines. I might go big, small, and then may not even have to touch. So this is my cloud. And if it's an idea, I might write the text first and then draw the cloud around it. I might also start to draw around the cloud and then eventually come back and draw, because we know that clouds are kind of layered. I might just come back and draw clouds around that for more ideas. So what could happen is you could have an entire page full of ideas. These could be sticky notes. It's great to have them write things down so you're not it's not slowing down the conversation. That's another thing, is sometimes you could have 200 sticky notes all of a sudden on a wall, and it's like, oh, how do I manage all of that? Well, you still have to one at a time talk about each of the things, maybe cluster them. So you can kind of throttle the conversation by slowing it down on purpose, by only having one person share at a time and you writing it down, or everyone writing down at the same time so that you can harvest as many ideas as you want, cluster them, and maybe each one of these clouds is a cluster. And then maybe you can label them with themes, right? So if you have a bunch of sticky notes in here, that's one theme. And each one of them can be labeled. And tomorrow, when we start talking about dreams and figuring out what the desired outcomes are, I'm going to give you 4 templates, maybe 5. We already talked about high bar, low bar. That could be a type of dream. You know, it's not as dreamy. It's not as, woo-woo-y, but it's very practical. But we're going to talk about how do you get to those desired outcomes, and I'm going to give you actual templates. So it's going to be less about icons and more about, here's a template that we would work on. Yeah, Heidi, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you for noticing. I was thinking about when you have a situation with lots of people and lots of post-it notes and you do the clustering. Do you do the clustering or do you let the group do the clustering?
It all depends. It depends on the size of the group. It depends on if the group is willing to do that. I like to get the group to do as much work as possible, because how often do we get hired as facilitators to help a conversation and then we leave and then they can't function? It's like if you teach them to fish, if you teach them to cluster themselves, then they actually have to make some of those connections for themselves. But again, it depends. If it's like, okay, we just have a lot, we're all going to do it together and do it quickly, or do we need to have a more in-depth conversation about this? And then do we break out into groups and have the groups talk about it, and then they begin to cluster? It really all depends on what it is you're going for. Do you have a specific point in mind? Like, do you have something specific? Because I know it can be tough. It can be like you're managing a lot of information, but it just depends on the group and what the purpose is.
Yeah, I had situations where we have tried to cluster, but when you get so many post-it notes, I find it can be really overwhelming too.
Right.
Like it would be easier to let the group
do it.
do
Right.
it.
But you also have to allow them time, right? And so sometimes the idea is we want as many ideas as we can get. And then you already have the topics up on the wall, and then they just put them there. So it's like a pre-clustering, like they're already doing that. There's that.
Yeah.
Or it's, okay, here are the 3 things that we're focusing on. And it depends on how many people in the room. If there's only 3 people in the room, then you let them do as many as they want. If there's 40 people in the room, you say everybody gets 2. You limit them.
Yes.
And they get 2 stickies, but they don't get to put 10 ideas on a sticky. It's one idea per sticky, one idea per sticky, and you get 2. And then that clustering becomes easier because you can very easily start to see what are the ones that are alike. And then you start to see that there's a lot of energy around this one theme, right? This cluster's bigger than these clusters over here. And then in a facilitation opportunity, this is where I love to say, okay, here's our top 3 or our top 5 or our top 10, depending on what has the most energy around it. And then I like to say, can someone point out some hidden gems? Now, this gets people from thinking about their idea was the most important to, ooh, what were some of the ideas that I saw that maybe didn't get enough attention? Or maybe the extroverts have been talking the whole time. Maybe you saw someone who's an introvert write something down and you want to help bring that out. There's a hidden gem over there. And so again, hidden gem. So sometimes I have 2 flip charts set up, and the way that I draw flip charts is again like a calendar but longer. And I put top 5 or top however many seems like a good mathematical formula, right? Like, here's what you all did. It's like a celebration. Yay, we did it. We came up with our top 5. We can tell our bosses. And then I like to say, but hold on a second. Now we have this beautiful idea over here, and this is the hidden gem.
Heather, we
And
can see what you've done to the side.
thank you. Sorry. And here I would write hidden gems. And this really helps people maybe with not as big of a voice get heard, or maybe ideas that we had never thought about get seen. And that again, yeah. Go ahead.
Please continue.
No, I was just excited about it. I just love this idea.
Yeah, I realized, like, really we have given too little time for, or allowed too little time for clustering and just looking at what we got in. Like, we've been doing it too much hurry. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely
really
have to give it time. And you have to decide, again, what's the purpose? Is it, again, to get as many ideas out and get them sorted? Like, are these people that are ready to roll up their sleeves? Or is this, we need to have a serious conversation about this. Why is this important? And then think about the structure. So when I said, you know, here are the 5 topics, put as many ideas in those topics, you were like, oh, it's like pre-sorting, right? So one time I was in a meeting, and the big idea is that we have 2 companies that are going to come together and they do the same thing. So one is going to acquire the other. So it was literally, what does company A do? I should do it this way. What does company A do? And what does company B do that's unique? And what are we doing that's the same? Because we don't want one company to be like, well, we're the bigger company, so we're just going to tell you this is what we do and you have to conform to us. It was like, let's take the best of what we both do and say, okay, we're going to definitely do this, but we're not going to, like, this person's going to take care of this one. This company's going to take care of this one, but together we're going to focus on this. So there's structures. You could use a simple Venn diagram. Where are our efforts duplicated, right? What makes us different? Where are we doing the same? Now we're talking about going from icons to structures, to templates, to ways that we can work together. So if you have an idea and you're like, okay, we have a bunch of clustering, tell me what the purpose is, and then I can help give you a structure to hang all that clustering on, if that's helpful. And that's something you can bring up in the design meeting, or you can bring up in office hours. And that's a great example. So if any of you have an agenda item where you're like, ooh, it'd be really great to get people engaged in this area, bring that. And we'll look at a couple of different ways to visualize it. So when I met with my client the other day, I didn't have this printed out, but I had it in my head. And I was thinking, you know, she was telling me what the purpose was. So I was writing it down, and I was learning about, you know, what the organization was about. And then she went right into logistics. And so sometimes when I'm doing logistics, I draw a little clipboard. Here's the things that we got to check off. Or I might not even draw the clipboard. I might draw just a series of check boxes and write my text next to them so that I can literally check these off. If I have something I have to do at a meeting, like, oh, this is my to-do list, then I will literally make little boxes like that and write next to them what it is I need to do. And honestly, if there's something over here like, oh, I've got to make a top 5 and a hidden gem, I'll just draw them right on top of here. So visually, when I get done taking my notes with my client, I know what my to-dos are. I don't have to make a whole new list. I've already written it down somewhere. I just put a little checkbox next to it, and I know that's in my head. Those are some of my tasks. So my client went right to logistics, and I went, okay, that's fine. I'm glad I know that, since they're giving me that information now. I'm not going to say stop. We'll talk about that later. I'll just take it all in, because for some reason that was important to her to tell me that. And then I'll go back to, what is it you want to get out of this? How do you want people to feel? And then I start going into designing that meeting for them, or that particular activity. So she had an entire agenda set up, and I went, wow, There's only one area where I see visuals could really fit. And so I showed her. And then she started getting ideas. Well, what if we do this? And she ended up saying, what if on the way in, people decide to write their deepest meaning value, like what's important to them, what's one of their values, on a sticky note, and we make like a centerpiece out of it. I was like, that sounds great. Like that already, she's thinking visually as soon as they walk in the door. And so there's a lot of visual solutions that we can come up with. And when those ideas come up, that's when we can write, a light bulb around some of those ideas. And this just gives a place. Now, this may not make sense to you as a structure if you don't know appreciative inquiry, but if you do know appreciative inquiry, you can use this structure to throw down a whole bunch of ideas. And then what I do is I take this whole thing and my thoughts, and even we get all the way to the delivery phase. What does that look like? Is it in person? Is it online? We're figuring all that out. That's what I use to write my statement of work. That's what I write to inform my contract. So none of this is wasted. This is all going into how I'm going to write my proposal or how I'm going to write my statement of work. And it takes it and moves it to the next step. Yeah. So what other questions do you have? What else is coming up for you? Anything else you'd like me to draw?
I find in a lot of groups that I'm working with, there's things that have to then be communicated to others.
Yes.
So we get to a point. Do you have anything that you would show for communication?
That's great. Well, how do they usually communicate?
Well, it could be a variety of ways.
Right.
So depending,
Email.
it's generally in my industry, it would be like, cascading of meetings.
Right. Right. There's a megaphone. It's that at the next meeting, this is what we're going to talk about. These two little icons here, you could say on March 8th at 10 a.m. Zoom, you're going to talk about this topic. That's it. Just this little thing right here. And I know this sounds silly, but you can take a picture of that and that could be at the top of the email because it's a visual and they're not going to forget that. They're going to be like, oh yeah, let me go put that on my calendar right now. And looking on our computers for things like if you're in Teams, Teams has a gazillion apps that are associated with it. So if your client or your company works in Teams, there's all these little icons. There's little app icons. So anytime you're going to do app icon, you're like, you know what? We communicate via Facebook. So you're going to see it as a Facebook event or, see it on LinkedIn, whatever. It's like whatever the app or whatever, everything seems to have some kind of an icon and they're so simple because somebody designed them to be easy to remember that wherever you're going to communicate that, and you don't have to put a heart in the envelope, but an envelope or mail, that looks like physical mail. You add a couple of little lines behind it. It's sort of like, whoosh, that could be email, check your email. Some of these icons can then soon be adopted by your audience. Oh, that's what she means by that. And now we have a visual. You don't have to have an entire paragraph or block of text to explain what, we're going to communicate the next thing via email. It's just like, what's your email? Yeah. As soon as you started talking that way, though, I was thinking, okay, what is the change management tool that we're going to create in this meeting that people are going to use later on? And sometimes it doesn't get designed in the meeting, but sometimes there's either you, a visual practitioner, a graphic designer, someone who can take the information that was discussed and turned into a job aid, can be turned into a spotlight, can be turned in some way of communicating what happened in that meeting. That is part of the design process. So let's talk about that for just a second. How many of you, after you get out of a meeting, someone somewhere creates a document? It's a working document or a final document that talks about the meeting. And maybe it's not a meeting, maybe it's a big long project over time, right? So what do those usually look like? Because I've made lots of different kinds and I'd love to hear something that's more contextual for you. Does anybody have something like that? Heidi, I see you're muted. You're like,
Yeah, we write a lot of Word documents that nobody reads. We
yes.
should read. We
Yeah.
don't. Mm.
So I worked for the government and we called that shelfware. That was something that went into a binder and then it went on the shelf and nobody ever read it. And so then we said, okay, what's the right visual to keep this going? And in some cases, it was as simple as, and I'll just draw out a few examples here. In some cases, it was as simple as, okay, it was a bunch of ideas. So we talked about this, we talked about this. This was a really big topic of conversation and it's going to affect a whole bunch of people. And then we talked about this for a little while and then we got big on this again and it's somehow connected to this. And then this, someone, even if it was just kind of sloppy notes, that was the whole document that went out. Or you could take this to a graphic designer. And this is how I got started. I was a graphic designer for a leadership development company. And I was like, I want to be in the meetings where all this stuff is being talked about because I'm transactional. They're just giving me this, we call it a spaghetti and meatball plate. And they want me to make it into this beautiful entree so that the rest of the organization can eat it. So I would be given things like this and that would be sent out. But eventually what I started doing was asking questions to then say, okay, we're going to create what's called a conversation map. This is going to talk about what we talked about and what the rest of the organization needs to hear. And here's where the purpose became important. Maybe we talked about what was the ultimate goal or mission that we're all trying to get to. What are some of the no kidding things that need to happen along the way? These could be steps in a process. Who are the people that were in the room or that should be in the room? And you might even make up a miniature RACI chart. Does anyone know what a RACI chart is? This is where you have people in a room and you decide who is going to be responsible for this effort. Who's going to be accountable? What's the difference? The responsible person is the CEO. The accountable person is, that's the person we're going to go to because they're the one that's leading this effort. Who needs to be consulted? This is like, okay, we've got a couple of people that work in this other department and we need to ask them how it's going to affect them. And then we have who needs to be informed. And this is, oh my gosh, this is going to affect someone, even though they're not in this room or part of this project, it's going to affect them. So we need to let them know that we're doing it, right? So there might be, you might create a form like this. You might say, okay, your goal is also, maybe this is also your vision or whatever. Here are your steps. And your steps might be broken down over time, right? So this might be Q1, Q2, Q3. Who knows how you're going to measure this? Maybe they're not measured over time at all, but they're measured by, we know that we've been successful when, and we're just going to draw a birthday cake. When we've checked this box. So this is our success criteria. Now, this is a whole bunch. I'm throwing a bunch of stuff on here. Any one of these areas could be a chart in and of itself. But the idea is, and this is when we get into design, we're going to talk about when you want to communicate something out to the rest of the group, what do they need to know? Do they need to know who is involved? Do they need to know what it's going to take to get there? Why they're doing it? Or what are the things that, we know that we've been successful when this happens. Oh, and by the way, what's going to be the big, thing that gets in our way? That's like a hurdle or something. Like what are going to be some of those things that are going to get in our way, our distractions, our hurdles, our challenges. And when we create a really simple template like that before we even go into the room, because we know that's what they need to talk about and what we need to communicate after the meeting, we can have a template already drawn up or in the back of our head, and we can just write in the thing, and that can guide our conversation. We can write the appreciative inquiry questions to go along with that, right? What's our vision? What is our desired outcome? What are the best steps we can take to get there? Okay, they're not the best steps, they're just steps. Okay, we can just write down some steps. And then what if at the top here we say, what's going to motivate us to get this done? And then we have a little quote because somebody in the room said something so brilliant, we got to write it down. And then everybody remembers that because you can feel it in the room. It made people feel good. There's always somebody that says something really great, right? So leave some room for quotes, leave some room for what people are saying, and write down the things that are going to help you get towards that goal. And when they write something not so fun down, maybe that goes along the bottom here because it's not the first thing that's read, and we've recognized that that's going to be a challenge for us or a hurdle. And what happens is when we do something like this, like I've never drawn this before, I'm just telling you a story. But when people start talking in a room and you start making space for those things, then you've got something you can share out. Then that meeting just didn't happen in a silo. And then now we go back to that, what made this valuable, right? It's people's time and energy. They got to share. They saw their words written down, so they feel seen and heard. They feel like they're valued. And now that's going to go out to other people. So that's just an example of a kind of a conversation map can be a change management tool. And it's really great for really large organizations where you've only got a few people talking and we got to get the message out to a lot of people. And I'm happy to show you some examples of those in the design session if you need. Okay, any other questions? Because we're at the top of the hour. So here's what we have coming. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that, like, how would you recommend, like, somebody like me, like, I'm not a visual person, like, this is brand new, and so, like, I'm concerned that I'm going to, like, be nervous and pay a lot of attention about, like, the visuals if I start, like, my next, like, meeting with something like this.
Yeah.
So, like, what would be some advice or some ideas to start to introduce this into parts of the work that are not, like, going to take away from, like, doing the work, but are going
Right.
to start the
I love
change
this.
process.
I love this question. If anybody needs to drop off, I totally understand. I do want you to take note of we're meeting here for this week. And then I think that's all I have for today. So let me answer that question. If you are just starting out in visuals, I will tell you that go where you feel safe. Don't plan to do a great big huge mural in the very first meeting right out of the gate. I tried that and it was a failure. It was awful. Don't do it. So just learn from me. Also know that our bodies are meant to do this work. And I'm going to give you a quick visual lesson and draw this out and what that means. And I don't think I've shared this in this class before, but I want you to be able to see this. And that is that we can think faster than we can listen. And we're listening faster than other people are talking. This is all happening so fast. That's why when I'm talking and you're listening, you can think about 5 other things. You might even be thinking about what you're going to have for dinner, or you're thinking about some things you have to do after this meeting or this class, right? So I'm talking, you're listening, but you're thinking way faster. It's okay if you're not focused because you're a faster thinker than I am a talker. But then there's all this time for us to write and draw And some of us write faster and some of us draw faster. So these can be interchangeable. And what's happening in the middle here, all this is synthesizing, which means you have all this time to determine what you're going to write down and draw. You're not a robot. You can't do it all. And it comes at you and it's very, very fast. And over time, it's like a muscle you get better and better and better at. Some people are excellent visual thinkers, but they may be terrible at drawing and writing. Just might not happen. So that's okay. If you could figure out where your strengths are in all of this, for me, it's writing, like actual lettering. When it goes fast, it looks terrible, just like everyone else's, but that's my strength. And my strength is the thinking and making connections. And I have to really work on listening. And so there are listening models out there. There's lots of listening models for visual thinkers. And the three that I think are the top, Brandy Agerbeck teaches it's a type of listening that it's anticipatory. Like you know what someone's about to say, so you know where to put it on the chart. And you're like, what? That's like mind reading. No, it's about looking at talk patterns. Anticipatory. And then, so that's Brandy Agerbeck. And then Kelvie Bird does generative listening. And these are listening models that are made by visual practitioners that know how to teach this, generative. And so hers are about patterns, what's happening now as opposed to long patterns. What are the beliefs, the feelings, the behaviors? There's all these different levels. And then the last one is Sophia Liang. And hers is about lenses, listening lenses. So how do we listen with a certain lens in mind, depending on the purpose of the outcome? And I use all of these when I'm listening, but I start with the lenses because I want it to equal the purpose, that desired outcome. And then when I'm working live, it's both of these things, but the anticipatory listening helps me with fast, and the generative listening is more slower and over time. And this is all possible, but it takes practice. And every step of the way, when you are writing something down as a meeting is happening, you could easily get caught off guard with, oh my gosh, I wrote that wrong, or I drew that wrong, or I put that in the wrong place. And you don't want that to get in your way. And so start with easy projects. So as you're filling out these handouts, start with projects that are not high stake projects, things that you can try over and over again. If you have a small group that you work with on a regular basis, that's where you introduce it. And introduce it on a piece of paper, just writing in front of you. Just start practicing with them. Don't tell them you're doing it, just do it. If somebody notices, great. If someone says, can you do that up on the whiteboard? It's time to go to the whiteboard. I can, I'm a little nervous about it. Just do it at the whiteboard. Yep. And then you'll start to find new ways to do it that you feel comfortable. And I'd always say, go where it's comfortable and stretch yourself for the next time. See what works, repeat it, and then add only one thing that's new. So if you're like, I just want my handwriting to look good, I'll grant you all access to how to improve your handwriting class. I'll do that like right after this class. But if you're like, no, I want to learn how to draw icons, I can give you some resources for icons. Just start small and then grow. Yeah. That's how I did it. I started with a sketchbook. All right. Anything else? I threw a lot at you. Yeah.
I just wanted to let you all know that I've been freezing and being kicked out repeatedly. So
Yeah.
I didn't really catch a lot of what you've been talking about.
Okay.
So Heather, I'm sending you a separate email. But I won't be able to be on live tomorrow with the Zoom because I got called into a work thing, unfortunately.
No worries.
So I'll see you again on Wednesday.
Excellent. All of these are recorded anytime.
Am I frozen again?
No, but you can't hear us. Oh no. All right. Well, all of these sessions will be recorded. I'll give you access to the recording right away. And then by, I would say over the weekend, after this week is over, I'll put everything in the classroom. So you'll all have the Zoom recordings right away that you can watch if you need to watch them right away. And then you'll have access to the finished recording and any of my other resources and notes after this weekend. Okay. Excellent. Well, tomorrow we're going to dream. So you're going to sit back, you're going to dream, you're going to get some ideas about some templates, and then we're going to rush into design and delivery. And then we can also come up with a second office hour date if you need it, or if you need a one-to-one, I'm happy to meet with you as well. All right, everyone. Great seeing you. Have a great day. Thank you.